This is a Longines Comet. This was made in a time when the Swiss watch industry was experimenting with the using of plastics in their mechanical watches. And as a result of the failure of plastic, this watch came to me all apart in pieces and in Ziploc baggies. Now, looking from the back of this mechanism, this is a Longines 702, and it looks like your normal 17-jewel watch movement that is pretty standard for the period of time in which it was made. The dial side shows a different story in how it records the time. The cannon pinion and attached wheel, engages with two additional gears to drive a ring around the outside that has an internal gear, and this ring is the minute register. The hour register, while pivoting on that central cannon pinion, is actually driven by the minute wheel pinion. The first plastic failure that I addressed in this watch was the gear on the back of the hour register disc. Evidently, there was some sort of binding, and the driven plastic wheel couldn't hold up to the driving steel pinion. After I've counted the teeth in this gear and measured the diameter, I set out to make a new gear. So as I've shown before, the process of making a gear starts with a jeweler saw cutting out a wheel blank from brass stock, then truing it up in the lathe and eventually transferring it to the specific lathe that I have set up for gear cutting. And my apologies, I know everyone loves to watch the gear cutting process, but I didn't video this particular gear being made. But here's some pictures of this particular gear done, though it's still in that lathe that I used to cut it. If you would like to see some gears being cut, you can check out some of my other videos. Then, having bored out the central hole to fit the cannon pinion, I test this gear in the watch. After this, I carve and cut out the bad plastic gear and epoxy this new gear in its place. I use the cannon pinion as the guide, lining up the central hole of the gear with the remaining hole in the disc. After the epoxy is cured, I use a needle and a fine blade to clean out any excess epoxy between the gear teeth or in that central hole. The second issue I have to address is the broken dial feet. There are short plastic stubs still there, so what I opted to do is to reduce the diameter of those posts using a rose cutter with an appropriately sized inside diameter. I made new dial feet, again of brass, with the outside diameter which will fit into the movement, but the inside diameter to match the plastic ones. And the inside diameter I drill only as deep as necessary to receive the stubs that are there. These new feet, again, were epoxied to the old ones, and then after the epoxy had cured, we clean up the excess around the edges. Lastly was the chapter ring, which was supposed to have a pin or a foot that sat in a hole drilled in the case. This time I drilled into the chapter ring and epoxied in a brass pin I had turned on the lathe. With this fixed in place, I could reassemble the chapter ring and crystal in the case. After the movement had been serviced, the assembly of the dial was pretty straightforward. The hour disc and minute ring are held in place by the fixed dial. The gray dial is undercut, so both the ring and the disc move freely, though they are still being held in place. Incidentally, the one plastic part I did not have to make or repair was the minute ring with its internal gear. This ironically comes after I developed a tool for cutting internal gears. If you haven't seen those videos, check out the links in the description below. And here we go, up and running as it's intended to be. So thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate the viewership, and I hope this was helpful for you. Be well.